We go.
Cool.
All right. Hello and welcome to episode 875 of the Player One podcast for Tuesday, August 29th, 2023. I'm your host, Greg Stewart. With me, as always, from the west coast of the US of A, is Mr. Chris Johnston. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going, Greg?
Not bad. And super excited to welcome a special guest this week. Somebody that we've been talking about trying to get on the show for a long time. Although that makes it sound like we couldn't set up our schedules. Really, it was just because nobody bothered to ask him. Because the first time we asked, he was like, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll do it." So I want to welcome Electric Playground's own Victor Lucas. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And Greg, you were in the last Rocket and Reagan Awards, which was
Yes.
terrific to have your voice in there. And I love when, because we're all busy, and we talked a little bit before we started rolling, but we're all busy and we can't keep up with what everybody's doing because we're all cranking on games. And whether you're making them or we're playing them and reviewing them, it's hard to just stay in touch with all the media stuff that's out there. But I know you guys have been at this for a long time on both sides of the fence, and this is a treat and an honor to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the feeling's exactly the same. Like I said, saying that we wanted you on here for a long time makes it sound like we were just, begging you to do it. And it's just one night I thought, why have we not just reached out and asked Victor? He's super nice.
He
always
me.
answers
Yeah.
messages, and here you are. So yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. As we were chatting a little bit before the show, I think we've all been around the games industry for approximately the same amount of time, 25 years or so. At this point, actually, even I don't want to say longer than that because it makes it feel a lot older, but a quarter of a century, And what I'd love to do before we really get into a big discussion is I've always been a little bit curious about how the heck do we get to the point that Electric Playground is on television? Like how did you get your start there, and how did that transition happen?
It was not easy. It took some years, but I going in the Wayback Machine, I had some concerns about. I was an actor and I was a waiter, and I had some concerns about growing old, kind of waiting for people to see me and to hire me. And I'd go to auditions, and some would be good, and some would be not so good. And it really hit me. One night, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and I went on this vacation in Mexico, and on this bus trip through these winding hills, I just had this like nervous breakdown. I mean, I'm probably over dramatizing it, but it felt consequential for me, and I felt like I had to come up with something with my life that I felt I was kind of charting my own destiny. And so we got back to our hometown, which is in Vancouver. And the first thing that I did was I wrote down 100 different ideas for different things that I would like to see get made or be a part of. And the one that won was a television show that really went behind the scenes in the video game industry and got to know the people that made the games and did things differently. Greg, you're in Canada, so you're familiar with Video and Arcade Top 10. And I don't mean to throw them under the bus, but there was a lot of that show, and there were many other shows that were really tailored to kids, and they were kind of garbagey. And I was in my 20s, and I didn't want to make a overtly commercial, infomercial thing. I wanted to actually get into the world of how these games were made, and that was essentially my pitch. And I put a 3-pager together, and it started with my girlfriend saying, "That's cool, go for it." I mean, honestly, none of what I do would have happened without her. And awesome. We've been together for a long time, a super long time. But she was there right from the very beginning, and she thought it was cool. And then I just kept having conversations with people, and eventually it got to broadcasters, and we put a demo together. And pitched demo tapes, and the first station to sign on with the idea was a channel out of Bellingham, Washington, which broadcast into Vancouver. So it was an American station, was our first station, KVOS, and sat down with the general manager, David Reed. Shout out to David Reed, wherever you are, and showed him the demo. And he said, "That's very good, but yes, we'd like to proceed. What would you need from me?" And I said, "Well, how about a letter saying that you want the show? Because then we could take it to sponsors and other stations and stuff." He said, "Oh, yes, that'd be great. I can prepare that for you. When would you like it?" And I said, "Well, how about right now?" And so he sat down and wrote it right then. And so we left our first station with a an acknowledgement that they wanted the show. Now we still had to raise money and get other stations and all that stuff. But that was the mid 90s. It was, I think, 1996 that we put that together. So we'd already been to E3 in 1995 and back to E3 in 1996. And then we went to a television convention called NatP, and I met with broadcasters there, and had some good conversations. And the Chum Group actually met
Mhm.
with Moses Neimer. Um,
Oh, wow.
he wasn't the person that we did any kind of negotiating with, but he kind of acknowledged that there was an idea there. And it was Jay Switzer, I think, was a part of that initial kind of group of rest in peace, Jay, and some other people over at Chum in Canada. So we got picked up with stations called the New VR or the New Stations, New RO or something like that, Ontario-based stations. And then we also got the Craig Group, who had they didn't quite have MTV Canada, so everything was changing through the 90s and early 2000s, as you can imagine. But
Mm.
we ended up on this little grouping of stations down the west coast of the US and across the country in Canada. We did our first season, and the ratings were really solid. In 1997, I still have the TV guide from the San Francisco market. We were on KBHK in San Francisco, and it was the Price is Right guy. Drew, not Bob Barker, rest in peace, but Drew Carey was on the
Yeah.
cover, and the ratings were good, and everybody was getting back to us, especially in San Francisco, which was a huge video game market then. It's a little
Really?
more,
Oh, wow.
different now. It's a little more scattered to the winds now, the video game industry. But San Francisco was key, and they were very happy with our Saturday afternoon ratings, and they were like, "Oh yes, we're going to absolutely continue." And so we kind of progressed in this sort of self-syndicated model with sponsors on board to offset the production costs. And then through many permutations and business relationships and meetings and stuff, we ended up on some networks like Space in Canada and MTV
Mhm.
Canada, on Discovery Science in the States, eventually on G4 in the States. And eventually, our biggest relationship was with a huge broadcaster in Canada called Rogers, and they had the rights to G4 Canada and all the city stations across the country, and they liked what we were doing. We did a show for them called The Lab with Leo Laporte, which
Mhm.
was already had been called something else. I forget what it was called, for help. And then we rebranded it and called it Lab with Leo Laporte, and that was a daily show. We figured out how to do a daily show kind of through the work of that. And then I pitched the idea of Electric Playground as a daily show, EP Daily. And so in 2008, we went daily with EP, made 300 episodes a year of that. And then in 2010, we went daily with our other TV show, Reviews on the Run, and made another 300 episodes. So we were making so much content, and started doing a lot of behind the scenes material. But it wasn't all like at once, right? I mean, that's the thing. It was really hard to get on TV. It was really expensive, and we had to learn a lot. And I was lucky enough to just find beautiful, fantastic, awesome people that were really collaborative and as excited as I was to figure it out. And then once we were ready to get to daily, we had a pretty good machine going, and we were able to kind of we built a really cool company where people didn't overwork themselves, but we delivered so much material. And I'm in touch with all those people now, and everybody's very proud of what we've done. And everybody looks back fondly on that time. It was amazing.
I think you absolutely should be. I mean, to me, what's fascinating about that story is that you hit in the States so quickly because,
Mhm.
and I mean, we're both from Canada. We both grew up around the same time.
Yep.
Now I'm on the East Coast, and I'm not sure that the sort of the feeling growing up would have been the same. But like when I was growing up, and especially when I got into my teenage years, in my early 20s, I wanted to be part of the games industry, especially the press side of the games industry. But to
Yeah.
me, that seemed so far away. Like there
Right.
wasn't anything you could do in Canada. You needed to be in the US. And there was a very much a feeling that permeated at least anyone I knew who wanted to do something like that. Is like that's just not something that you get to do when you are in Canada. You know what I mean?
Well, you found that to be a fallacy yourself because
True.
you worked with American companies, and the thing that I discovered is Americans like good ideas. They like to create business around interesting concepts and coming first to market with things. And so in retrospect, it's not surprising that Americans wanted to work with me and the team. And I was out there pitching what we could do as a collective, but I had this fire in belief, and what I know about producing is that if the central figures don't want to do that work, it's not going to be good. It's not going to last, and it's not going to be well made. And I still have that fire to build something that I'm proud of, and to honor this incredible work that the games industry builds. And man, they saw that in me. And so people not only did deals with us, and I was the one in the conference rooms, and trust me, it was nerve-wracking. I had gone from being a waiter, but being a waiter and an actor actually prepared me to be a producer, because I'd gone from that sort of vantage point of selling a business, the restaurant business, and also working for tips and hoping that people would like me. I went from that to walking into conference rooms alone, where all these guys in suits would be sitting behind desks, and they basically want to know how much money they're going to make, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. How big is the video game industry? How big are the viewership? How big will the viewership be? And how will this be successful? Where would the advertising come from? And I had a lot of those answers, but more than that, I also had I broke it down in a way that was really easy for people to understand. And when I saw it like that, it was easy to convey that to people in a way that it felt like, yeah, why the hell hasn't this been done before?
Right.
And I think when people clicked with Electric Playground, they might not have remembered the name or me or any of the people involved, or even the people we talked to. But what they did see was like, wow, man, these guys work their butts off to go to visit everybody, and they have all of this incredible footage. And man, video games are way better than I think in my mind. And so that was our perpetual give back to the video game industry, and kind of perpetual offering to the world that we had with our content was like an examination of this world that had been sort of shrouded in secrecy and mystery. And we gave people an inside look at the humans that were endeavoring to entertain people. And, it was a beautiful responsibility and an honor to be in that position. And wasn't easy. The work was difficult, and I was on the road all the time. And my patient girlfriend would, take me to the airport and wave bye-bye a lot. And, and then later we had our daughter, and lots of trials and tribulations. But the core of it, the core work of it, has just been so rewarding, just so gratifying to be in a position of kind of being in this avatar role of letting people see into this world. And I think the broadcasters kind of picked up on that. And so that not only did they do these deals, but they gave us a tremendous amount of trust and autonomy. And I think that was the biggest lesson that a lot of broadcasters learned from working with us, is like, we solved things. It wasn't me. It was, I'd come back to the group of people that I have, and I'd say to our art director, Tavis, like, I want a lightsaber battle in the middle of this interview. So it's going to come out of our microphones or whatever. So how do we do that in 1997, or 1998, and we solved those things together. And, our post supervising producer, the sort of main man that ran the machine, Aaron Mooney, he figured out when we went daily, we never had a budget of like a big American show. Like for the amount that we produced, it's akin to like a newsroom or an Entertainment Tonight or something like that, or one of the daily talk shows or something in the States. And those have staffs of like 200 people or whatever. We got to about 40 people, which is sizable for a Canadian company. It's usually 10 to 1, I notice, just like the just like the population, I feel,
Yeah.
But we had to figure out how to get all of our edit systems networked and connected with each other. And this is, this was when we had tapes. We were digesting tapes and eventually Blu-ray discs called XD Cam. So we had all this data that had to go between editors, so we didn't have to keep digitizing everything and then dumping it and digitizing it all over again because space was an issue. And so we networked everything, and we had this huge server called the Edit Share. And Aaron Mooney figured out how to connect Avid, which I think was we went from all.
I remember
we worked
Avid.
with all of them. Yeah, but we had Avid systems on it, which was expensive as hell. But we had all of those different systems connected to this Edit Share, which I'm pretty sure it was Avid. But anyways, it was impossible until he figured it out. And so they put our company and him on the front page of their website to kind of show that the world that it was possible. And that kept happening. I mean, we were delivering, HD episodes of our show every day to Australia, and the broadcaster down there was like, how are you guys over the internet? How are you guys able to do this at this quality? And we're working with, I don't want to throw anybody in the bus, but we're working with a huge other broadcaster, and their stuff looks like crap. How are you guys able to do this? And I just point at my team, I work with really brilliant, driven people that are going to figure this stuff out. And so we did. We just we had opportunities, and we didn't squander them, and we did the best that we could every day.
So you mentioned, and I mean, it did come through, because I have to say, I mean, I never knew how big your team was or anything like that, but when you were doing multiple daily shows there for a while, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience in television. I worked like a local cable company for a while, so I have enough experience to know that what you're doing wasn't easy at all. So it always blew me away that you were able to do that. But that's the way I envisioned it, was he must have a small army of people with him doing all this stuff. Did we lose him?
Did we lose him?
We lost him.
Oh no.
Well, let's see if he comes back. CJ's watching the dashboard. Oh no.
Now he's gone.
Hopefully he'll be back. Well, he had a good run. That's right. So that's our show for this week. No.
Half-hour show.
That's all we get. What have you been doing, CJ?
The usual,
Yeah. Do you want to talk trash about Phil since he's not here?
We could.
Yeah.
He's on vacation again. Well, who does he think he is? Me?
This guy's just using all the show funds.
Right. He's like, see you later, suckers.
Just travel the world.
Yeah. All right. He's back.
I'm back.
There he is. Hi.
I've been having troubles with my router. My router keeps flaking out on me. I forgot I was on Wi-Fi there. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Oh, no problem. Yeah.
So to go back to that, I just always made the assumption that you had a small army of people working with you. I mean, I guess
it was a small army,
but it's not giant.
No, and honestly, we figured out a way to even. I think the toughest thing was that we had a lot of analog technology, or it was the early days of digital going into analog, and like the cameras were pricey. We were also on the cutting edge with a lot of stuff too. Like we were the first video game show to be in HD in the world, and one of the first groups I think out there using Blu-ray discs, this XD cam format to a massive degree. And I remember having conversations with Fran Mirabella at IGN, and they eventually adopted that. I don't know if it was from us or whatever, but it just made a lot of sense for the amount of content that we were making. And we just had to kind of overcome a lot of those kinds of hurdles. I think what's true now, and I've been learning this in the kind of YouTube era of Electric Playground, is you can be anywhere and upload to an online storage service, and then that editor can download that and start to cut. And there's just a lot of procedures that you can utilize the internet for that we couldn't take full advantage of as we were evolving. Electric Playground's website launched in 1995, and when we launched, there were no background colors. It was just gray. And so we had these little animated GIFs and things like that, or GIFs on the page, but that was about it. Like it was a very, very simple thing, but we were out there very early on with all this stuff. And like you, I was just a massive fan of the magazines. I've been collecting
Mhm.
stuff since the 80s. I still have some of these, like Video Game Magazine and Atari Age and whatever, like lots of stuff, and a lot of the Future magazines. Loved Edge, and Next Gen magazine launched, I think, at the tail end of 1994 or
94
1995.
5, yeah.
Yeah. And the PlayStation was coming, and I knew that was the PlayStation 1 was really the like EP wouldn't have existed if the PlayStation wasn't coming. Like, people were not going to
Sure.
buy a show like ours about 16-bit games, not to reduce that work or to diminish it at all, but the idea of full 3D video games that had cut sequences that looked like they were made by Pixar, that was a very, very easy conversation to have with people,
Yeah,
and we were
for
also
sure.
all, like you guys, I'm sure, we were all kind of just enamored with this new 3D technology that was happening in video games. Even now, in retrospect, a lot of that early 3D stuff has aged way less well than the best stuff on 16-bit. But at the
True.
time, it was so impressive, like showing an executive jumping Flash and going, "Look at this, you're in this robot and you're jumping and you have this full 3D. Like, do you feel that? Do you feel that in your stomach?" And so it was cool to leapfrog off of that. But Next Gen and Edge, and in issue 2, I think, of Next Gen, David Perry had written a letter about the fact that there were there was TV about everything, like golf and, there were men's channels, all kinds of stuff, but there was nothing about video games. And so I wrote him a letter, and I think I might have written him a letter and sent him the letter, but I wrote him a letter and told him that I'm working on this pitch, for the Electric Playground, and we can't wait to come and see you. And then he wrote a reply and basically endorsed, Shiny endorsed, he, on behalf of Shiny Entertainment, endorsed the idea of the Electric Playground. And so we added that to our pitch documents back in 95. And I think that was also, you asked about, the steps there, but that was really important to me right from the beginning, was to integrate with the gaming industry. And we went to that first E3. We went to the very first one in 1995. I had that can take me down another road, but we spent the money to go to E3 and to meet everybody and to shoot some interviews. I met George Lucas at the very first E3. There were a lot of like huge signals that Michael Jackson was at the Sony party, and I met Tommy there. I met Jeff Keighley there. It was just a great excursion, a great trip, and a mind-altering kind of like validation that we were on a path. Like, that was such a great decision, because from E3 in 1995, it was like, of course we're going to stay this path. The New York Daily News wrote an article about Electric Playground at E3, because we were there with a full broadcast camera, and they interviewed me about why are you here? And it was, I think, a bit of a novelty that a Canadian was down there, and we were one of the only TV crews there, apart from maybe some local news and stuff, and explained the whole thing about where games are now and where they're going, and how important it is that we document this and get to know the people that make it. It's the thing that I always used, and it's still true to this day, is just the emotional impact that video games have. I mean, it's a huge business. It's filled with exciting work, but what gets lost, I think, in the conversation is just how emotionally impactful playing games is, and it's that emotion that brings attention and viewership and interest, and we've seen YouTube and Twitch kind of capitalize on it.
Capitalize on that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you go back and watch your old stuff? Like,
sometimes
have you watched the 95 E3 footage, like the stuff that you shot for the show? Like, have you gone back and watched that? And what do you think of it?
I do watch clips from time to time, for sure, and I cut them sometimes and put them up. Well, we have the first 6 seasons of our show on our YouTube channel right now. I'm proud as hell of it. I'm proud as hell, because we were making it up as we went. But I'll tell you something, man. Like, when you're a part of a team and you create something out of ether, didn't exist. It's just like the video game industry itself. I think we're all old enough to have recalled that moment of realization, like, whoa, those didn't exist. And now they sure as hell do. And holy crap, is this fun? I'm never not going to play, and it was so profound and impactful for me, obviously, that I wanted to build show to honor it. But to watch that first episode, and we went to Zoe Flower and her husband Drew's barcade called Blink in downtown Vancouver, and we had a watch party there, and we all watched it together, and it was profound. It was amazing. And I remember cutting my very first thing and learning how to edit on the show, and just and watching things come together, and it's just like, wow, this is really working, because I didn't know, right? I
Right.
believed, but it hadn't been done. Like, nobody was going to visit these companies regularly. It was always some weird little nichey thing or some news story or something we'd have to like search for, some kind of behind the scenes thing. I didn't know if it would all flow and make a show, but it did, and it felt that way right from the very beginning.
I think you made a really good point in that if the PlayStation didn't exist, Electric Playground wouldn't exist. But you're right, because there was just it was such a generational shift, not just from like a technology standpoint, but just the industry was growing up in the 90s. And there was such a great energy about it in general. And those of us who were kids when we were playing our 2600s or our Nintendos, we were looking for something to speak to us a little bit more. And I think that was the same reason why Next Generation Magazine was resonated so much with a certain age group. Was just like, I'm in my 20s now. I want more than, no offense to GamePro, but I want more than little happy faces on a one-page game review, and that's my coverage, right? So
yeah.
Well, the truth about games is there's room for all of it.
Screenshots, right? Like at a certain point, video game magazines were screenshots, tips, and tricks, and that was it. There was not a real behind the scenes thing, and you didn't really know the people behind these games. And then with PlayStation, and suddenly games were entertainment. Like there was a lot of talk about how the video game industry was much like the film industry, and there would be like auteurs coming out of this industry, and you had companies like Konami and Tecmo like sort of elevate their creators to that level. You had companies like Microsoft and Sony try to elevate the people who were behind these games. So I think, perfect time to offer a show like this that gives you insights that you weren't going to get on the printed page from magazines that were mostly about screenshots.
Yeah, and I not to deride the awesome work that was happening all through that time on magazines and in magazines. I was still reading all of that stuff. I love video game magazines. It was kind of like a mix of Much Music and Siskel and Ebert and the video game magazines and Entertainment Tonight, which used to be great, and then they kind of devolved after Hard Copy or something came out. Everybody became this tabloid garbage, and then TMZ picked up the baton. And we never wanted to do anything like that. But I would pitch the broadcaster, and I'd come in with stacks of magazines. So there's like 25 magazines about video games. There are 0 shows on your network. How do we change that? Let's talk about these creators, and let's show what these games will actually look like to play. And the game companies were so wonderful to work with. Everybody just opened their arms to us. And people recognize that we were from Canada, but I think we had a pretty good U.S. footprint for our content, and we were working with U.S. people, and we were just a lot of fun as a team to go to these events and to visit these studios and to come up with wacky ideas for how we would put all this coverage together. And we'd send the tapes. We'd have to send them VHS dubs of the stuff that we would work on. We couldn't just email them a clip or anything like that. And we'd get lots of big thank yous, And awesome. I also found working with Hollywood was really receptive as well, like working with movie studios and TV studios who welcome the idea of being able to communicate to a different crowd, and also not about their gossipy BS, like people. Right. We had lots of celebrities on our show right from the very beginning, and I've been lucky enough to meet all kinds of incredible people at every scale, and people genuinely dug the approach. They liked the concept, and it wasn't. I think one of the cool things about what we've always done is that we've never made fun at the viewer's expense. We've never been you know, overtly like this is only for geeks or nerds, or, you know, only geeks are, you know, we've never sort of been like that. You know, I think we've been much more inclusive, and we had to really learn that when we went daily. Like we couldn't even just be about video games, because we didn't want to when we were daily, by the way. Like that was just too much to just be games. We wanted to raise all the boats with the content and the coverage. And so the streaming, like Netflix, was kind of really blossoming then. They were so happy to work with EP, and because a lot of broadcasters were really threatened by what Netflix was doing, and they wouldn't cover their shows or talk to their people and stuff like that. And then there was, you know, infighting and stuff like that. But, you know, the movie studios were happy to have us at all their junkets and their carpets, and we had set visits all around the world. And in between all of that material, the beating heart was always video games first. You know, it was really, and God, I want to make that show today. I still want to. I miss the fact that it's not on the air right now, and not, you know, if I had the funding, we would be doing the same thing, because it's such a cool way to make content.
Well, here's hoping, right? I mean, that's, I think it would be great. A world where EP's back on the air would be fantastic. I
whatever
think,
the air means, but
yeah, whatever the air means at this point, exactly. I think, one of the things that I like, because I came into the industry, CJ started when he was like 12, but I came into the industry a few years after EP had been on the air. But one of the things that I sort of learned pretty quickly, and I think it goes back to what you just said about, you know, not dealing with the gossipy side of things, is that you and your show were just very well respected. Both amongst the press and amongst the game companies. And I think even because during the time that I was there, which was the early 2000s, that I was really part of the press on the magazine side, there was a real push to be lad mags. We were really trying to emulate lad mags, which I think is another minefield you managed to just step around completely. We
did. Yeah, we partnered with Insight, and they definitely had that. Like they were like a magazine partner, and they promoted us, and vice versa. And it was fine. I mean, like at the core of even Insight, they did get some video game coverage in there. But yes, everybody was. I don't even remember what the magazines were that were popular back then. That
Maxim was the big one. I know we were
Maxim,
trying to emulate.
Yeah. But you know, it was really amazing. I often forget to include the fact that the magazine world, the video game press world, was also a part of the story and enjoyed EP. Like our first season, I think Tips and Tricks was a sponsor, and Next Gen became a sponsor. We were partnered with EGM, partnered with Insight. And we had you guys, I'm sure both of you have been on the show at some point. Like we were always out, you know, we had cameras in so many different capacities because we wanted to cover the whole industry. And I think people picked up on that. But what I've told sponsors and broadcasters over the years is that step one was to make sure that the game developers that we were putting in front of the camera would like the show and would want to do that stuff. And so when I heard from them that they did, that was basically achievement unlocked with the concept, you know? And of course the viewers had to like it, and the sponsors had to like it, and the broadcasters had to like it. It's really hard to get all of that, you know, it really is. And then to also have the gaming press, who in any other, but the gaming press is pretty damn rad. There are a few people that get sort of up in arms and stuff, but I think everybody's in it together. You know, it's a tough racket, and I think everybody's pretty happy. There were a couple of people I remember getting really pissed off. There were a couple of journalists that totally belittled G4 launching to my face, even though that was a pretty big
huge
new deal for me. For me and for my team and for the industry in general. And I remember just saying to somebody, I said, because there was like this idea that we hope that G4 fails because it's going to be cheesy or whatever, because all TV about video games is cheesy. And I remember saying to some journalist people, it's like, you better hope that TV about video games doesn't fail, because if it does, that's going to be a huge atom bomb within our business. Now, it didn't fail necessarily because of the efforts of the people. It was more market conditions, and it certainly didn't fail because the competition from video game magazines was too severe. It was just it was a changing of media in general, and broadcast or advertisers and sponsors were just shifting all of their focus over to the internet, as we all know.
Yeah, I mean, that was we've all, everyone on this screen has lived through that in some form or another. I mean,
exactly,
that hit magazines as well, because everyone was trying to figure out how to make money on the internet, and everyone was shifting their budgets to the internet, and it just it didn't work. It's interesting to me that I look back on G4 now, and I have to admit I didn't watch a lot of G4. I watched your show. I did some freelancing for XPlay after I had left EGM, and that was great. My experience there was fantastic, and of course, on press junkets, you guys in XPlay, your cameras were always there. I had some my interactions with your show were mostly through Tommy. Yeah, we had a great time with every time. He was super nice just from the word go, and I think because we shared a love of cars. Because the 2 times that I met him were both racing
things. Oh, that's hilarious.
My first racing press junket, I raced a Dodge Viper against Tommy, and I beat him by like a half a second or something like that. So
Tommy was born for the show, man. He was just so energetic. And did he rub it in your face when he beat you?
Oh, he didn't beat me. I beat him.
Oh, you beat him. Okay. Yeah. Did you rub it in his face?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually I did want to tell this story real quick as well, and I doubt you would remember this, but the very first press junket I ever went on, because of course we were based in Chicago at the time, but like you said, the West Coast was, especially back then, was the market. Like so that's where you go for press junkets. I don't remember what it was for. I don't remember what game it was for or what company it was with. All I remember is going to a hotel and getting on a bus, and getting on a bus with a bunch of people that now I would know who all those people were. Then I had no idea who they were because I had just started. Right. And you walked onto the bus and you came straight to me and introduced yourself, and you knew my name and said, like, I've read your stuff and I really like it. You were just the first person in the industry outside of the Ziff Davis office who came up to me and introduced himself, and was just, not that everybody else wasn't friendly, but was just very friendly. So just wanted to throw that out there, because I think about that a lot. Every time I watch you, I think about that.
Well, that's nice. I mean, that's a nice thing to hear back. And honestly, man, I feel great joy and gratitude and privilege that I'm in this business. It wasn't a foretold conclusion, and I've had so much fun and so many incredible experiences, and I've just been so grateful. And I don't know how people get into this work and don't feel that way. If they're collecting a paycheck and they get to make games or talk about games and contribute to the dialogue around games and its misery, they should move away. They should do something else.
I am curious about your show and your content is largely so positive, and sort of what do you feel, because there's so much negativity, and you mentioned like the journalists who came up and kind of bashed G4. That seems to be like just a trend on YouTube and amongst content creation in general, where it's like the negativity is the thing that people watch. So some creators only make negative stuff, or like pull the topic of the day, let's bash Starfield, let's bash Redfall for episodes and episodes. And I wonder like what your take is on just tone of content, and
I think it's all interrelated.
How are you able to stop yourself from falling into that pit? Because obviously negativity gets a lot of eyeballs.
Yeah, well, I'm not interested in that. Like I would love people to watch the stuff, but I'm not like an analytics guy. And I also like to cover everything, and I know that's not the greatest for YouTube. YouTube really likes specificity, and they want the same thing over and over again. If somebody likes one video, they want you to make 50 copies of the same thing. that drives me nuts. You know, if I'm going to get up and contribute and work and try to build things, I want to be challenged by new ideas and new stuff. But I think it's all interrelated. I think this idea that G4 went away and Electric Playground went away and game trailers went away, in terms of teams of people going out there with video and connecting with people and also the games industry bottling everything up. I think there's just this clenched attitude around PR with video games. Like we have to worry so much about when we say this and who says this and how it's said, because it's this reaction to negativity, which is the low-hanging fruit for algorithms and for people to sell advertising against. And so right now, the entire video game sphere is at the mercy of whatever Twitter and YouTube's and Twitch's algorithms happen to be at. And right now, negativity makes them the most money. And I think it's incumbent on the industry to look at what's not working. And honestly, what's not working is all of this attention paid to, and I'm not deriding the value for certain projects and stuff, but we spend so much time focused on streamers and what they're going to build for the business and how they're going to, you know, put some promotion on things. And we've given a lot of viewpoint to YouTubers, a lot of people doing exactly what I'm doing right here. So I definitely understand the hypocrisy in all of this. But what we're missing is what EP provided for years and years and years, which is this direct dialogue that was unfiltered. It was honest. It was from the heart with game makers and the beating heart of what makes games tick, which is this insanely ambitious and optimistic drive to build something to make the world better and make it more fun and interesting for all of us. And people get stuck in their ruts, man. You know, they either see cynically, they see the financial opportunity by, making a YouTube thing where they're, a thumbnail like this, or they're just looking down and they cynically say, okay, well, I've got to do this. I've got to zero in on the bullshit or the things that people don't like, or they just won't frame it from a vantage point of, here's what's exciting or what's great about something. But honestly, we are losing as a society to not hear from game makers with, an honest, editorially distanced kind of way, because the marketing videos do not work. And these brand deals with streamers where we pay them to stream a game that they obviously don't give a shit about does not work. And we're not seeing, like, with this explosion of billions and billions and billions of people streaming on Twitch and all the YouTubers and everything, we're not seeing the sales on consoles or video game software exponentially grow in alignment with that. And so what should the business be doing? They should be encouraging new generations of people to want to become game developers. And how do you do that? Well, you work with companies that will get into your studios and talk to your people, and you will inspire future generations of game creation. And that's not happening. What's happening now is everybody wants to be XQC and do a $100 million deal with some startup crypto thing or whatever, and just have people watch them fall asleep on a stream, like, give me a break. It's insane.
No, that's
I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just feel like, why did the business decide? And I would love nothing more than to talk with developers every single day. I would love it. And I need to get back to that place, even if it's like this, even if it's Zoom or whatever. It's one of my favorite things to do. But it's a balance, when you're small. You guys know, when you're a small content creator, it's just like trying to figure out how to do it all. That's why I miss my team very much.
I mean, you've put that really well. I mean, everything you just said, you made a really good point. But I never looked at it from that side of things, where the incredible cynicism and negativity that surrounds a lot of the coverage now would really lead to game companies sort of circling the wagons. And because I mean, I go back and I watch some of the old episodes of EP and you're just hanging out in the studio and you're just putting microphones in people's faces. And one of the things that I actually love about watching those old episodes is you'll be talking to somebody at a studio and the Chiron comes up and I don't know who this person is. Like the name, you know what I mean? It's not always like Hideo Kojima, or it's not always an auteur. It's just sort of, here's the guy or girl that's working on this thing at this moment that's got something cool to say. And isn't that great? It's very raw and it's very just open and honest. And it's like, and the excitement is usually palpable. Right.
Yeah. And, we can't go backwards to television. We can't just say TV is the only way that people are going to get this material. And media is so different and challenged. And, websites are kind of brutal right now, like trying to surf a website without it just popping up all kinds of stuff. I don't have all of those answers. All I know is that we did something really cool and we accelerated for 20 years. And what I saw firsthand was an awareness of the business. I'll give you a great example. Well, there's a lot of things, but when we were doing a weekly show, we were talking specifically to an audience of players, and maybe their parents would zone in for a minute there and watch with them or whatever. And that we were educating people to a universe that they may not be familiar with, or they were hyper familiar with it. When we went daily, same content, expanded out a little bit. I would walk down the street in any city that we were daily on, and we were daily mostly in Canada. We did have some daily plays in some other cities, and I don't have any anecdotes there, but I would walk down the street and people would honk their horns. They would point at me. They would say video games. A lot of people don't know what my name is, but they'll just like video games, and that's a weird thing to be pointed at and have somebody say that to you, but that happened a lot. And what also happened is that it wasn't just 20-somethings or 30-somethings or teenagers. It was grandfathers and moms, and it was every age range, And so I'd walk in I'd be shopping or something. I'd bump into a whole family of people that all watch the show together. And that's missing, that's missing entirely, not just for, content around games, but in terms of entertainment, period.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think we should aspire to that. I think the business should get behind that as an idea. Like there's something intrinsically cool with being inclusive and not giving people exclusivity and not sort of cutting people out of the clubhouse. And you're not cool enough because you don't know what this destiny armor means for this character. So it's this content's not for you. We get caught up in all of this stuff. And then, it's like every game that comes out, we turn into, like Baldur's Gate 3 launch turns into some kind of negative thing. It's like, and we're just waiting for the shoe to drop with every single game that gets announced. It's like, no, let's dig in a bit. Let's meet the people that actually brought that out, that was our job. And so I feel like people really miss that. I feel like people, even if they're unaware of it, I think they miss that I don't know. It's aspirational to watch people be excellent at something and to be doing what they're doing. And we were so lucky that that's what our job was to go and talk to excellent people kicking ass, And I think it hurts the business that we're not doing that more.
Yeah. How do you stay positive, and how are you not burnt out?
I genuinely, I'm getting like 7. I'm on a chain right now. Hold on, it's all dad related stuff. How do I stay positive? I never forget that how lucky I am. I never do. The first year of Electric Playground on television, I made $1,000 an episode as the creator, executive producer, host, director, writer, cub reporter. That was a little bit of everything. But I made $13,000 Canadian, and I remember walking down, and that was all I made that year. And I remember walking across the bridge, probably saving money, not paying for the bus to get me to the office. But I remember walking across the bridge, and we were working nights 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. to edit everything, and I'd be in the editing suites with the editors, and we were all figuring it out. But I'm trying to shape the show, and I'd fall asleep, and I'd wake up with sticky notes on my head. I have to call somebody. I have to call somebody. But I remember walking across the bridge and just thinking to myself, I am the luckiest son of a bitch in the world. I had an idea for a TV show, and it's a freaking TV show. It's a TV show. We made a TV show, and we made a lot of them. We made over 4,000 TV shows, and they're in the process of being digitized. I can't announce the partner yet, but it's a really cool, really prestigious partnership. That's going to mean some cool things with all that material. But
that's awesome.
I've never forgotten that. I felt that, and I still feel that. And it's all the permutations and all the opportunities. I mean, I don't know. I feel very grateful that people send me video games to look at and review, and I'm friends with people all across the industry. I've grown up with so many of you guys, and it's the best business there is, and I know that. I'm lucky enough that I've been able to bounce around to other businesses and other types of industries, and I've got friends in lots of different kinds of offices, and what I do is very strange. It's very weird. Like, I tell the other parents that I know when I drop my kid off, it's like I'm lost in like 100-hour games right now. They're huge freaking games. My head is spinning, and I'm about to announce I'm doing something really cool. I'm about to host something really cool that came out of nowhere, and I'm so excited about. But it's and even if none of that continued, even if I just was kibitzing and just making my videos about the stuff that I'm playing or whatever, and chatting with people that watch the content or have been supporting this stuff for a long time, I'd still feel the same way. I just feel, I feel so fortunate and lucky. And I also feel like people should endeavor to, it's cliche, but they should endeavor to like really spend their lives doing what they want to do. It can be difficult. It can be really hard to persevere and to figure out how to do that. But the end of it is the end result of all of that effort to try to do that. And it might not be work related. That's the other thing. It might be hobby related, but to do something in your life that gives you that gratification and that enjoyment is so important, and yeah, I wish that for everybody. I really do.
It sounds like your philosophy, which I feel like is similar to ours as well. I mean, it sounds like your philosophy hasn't really changed then all that much from baby Vic back in the mid 90s to old man Victor now, where because I mean I know the three of us all started kind of the same way. I mean, I started a website because I just love video games and wanted to talk about them. I know CJ was doing a fanzine because you love video games and wanted to talk about them. But I have to say that it's something that I absolutely love about the content you make now and about you as a personality. And the fact I love everything you just said, because it's so easy in today's media landscape to be chasing that algorithm. And that's the guiding star, right?
Well, let's look at this objectively for 2023. This is probably the best year that video games have ever had. Like, games are launching that are good, that are getting buried because we're surrounded by choice and just the top flight kind of experiences that have ever been produced in any medium, but especially in video games. And what the hell do people have to bitch about? Right. Just play these beautiful works and dive into the details around them and celebrate them, and importantly, celebrate the humans that built them for us, rather than bitch about the 30 frames per second that Starfield is going to run on the Xbox machines. Think about all of the man hours and all of the ambition that it takes to create a game where you travel from planet to planet and have conversations with people and relationships with people. And, now that's just one example. Like, this year has been a defining year for the business, in the face of years of struggle with the pandemic and several other issues around and layoffs and growth and shrinking and all of that stuff. You know, I mean, Ascendant just made Immortals of Avium, which is a really good game. You know, it's maybe not a top 10 game in a year like this year, but it's their first game, and it's a really solid game, and it's a unique game. It's an original IP, and there's so much energy and love and effort and money poured into that thing. And that's just one of a bajillion titles this year. Humanity is super cool. I've only had a little bit of time with it, but it's super cool, you know? Yeah, and I feel like people don't see the forest for the trees, and they're really worried about making impressions and getting an algorithm to kind of pay attention to them. And fuck, I don't know, man. Like, I never have thought that way. I've just been grateful to be able to. I didn't think about that with the television programming. I don't think about that with YouTube. I love it when people watch the stuff. I love it more when people watch the stuff and they're shocked that I'm still doing it, but they're really happy that I am. I just I don't know. I'm just grateful. That's it. It's bottom line. I'm just grateful that I get to do what I do, you know?
Nice.
I'm curious. One thing I'm curious about, that we talk about this on the show every now and then, because back in the late 90s when we started, I know for me personally, I was sort of, I knew everything that was going. The industry was big, but it wasn't like an unmanageably huge industry to stay abreast of and to know what was going on and to try out all the major titles every year. Now I'm a long way out of that, and CJ is on the development side of things now. So we're not, you know, I look at people in your position or in the general games media now, and I'm constantly questioning how do you stay on top of this? It's gargantuan now.
It's hard. And it's what I struggle with, because I love doing the rundown, which is a news segment that we started in the TV show, and it's kind of like an encapsulated news bit. I especially love it when I can include sound bites from game makers and stuff like that in the stories that are topical. But if I'm doing that, I'm not playing the games. And when the big games are coming out, I feel like it's also my job to let people know if I like these things or not. You know, a lot of people's favorite part of our content has always been the reviews on the run components, and so I endeavor to try to keep that up. So it's a balance between that and the news stuff, and also the interview stuff, which I've got my own podcast, the Vic's Basement Podcast, which I love to do, but it's a lot of coordination and organization, and I do the best I can, juggling all of this stuff with these outlets that I have under the sort of tent of EP. But I also I don't cover free to play stuff. I don't get into microtransaction stuff. I don't really dig the live service movement. I don't have time. I want to cover more indie stuff because I love indie games, but I don't generally have the time to do that, especially in a crowded year like this. So I can't cover every single thing. And I got to tell you, as somebody that has had the budget to be able to cover every single thing, we used to be able to do second opinion reviews or third opinion reviews if the game justified it. And that was amazing, to have Ben and Jose out of San Francisco shoot their opinion, and Steven and Raju out of Toronto shoot their opinion. It was, God, I work with the best people. It was just incredible. And I miss that I personally can't, because I'm cutting everything and doing it all by myself. So I can't cover every single thing that I do. So what I do like, though, is I have this, the tools and the access to be able to share your thoughts have never been easier for people. I've gone off and shot stuff on my iPhone and clipped stuff out and posted it up. But I also, when I stream, I think there's a bit of on our Twitch channel, which is just EPN. When I stream there, there's a bit of like watching. I'm talking to myself to the people that are watching and stuff. But there's a bit of like watching my process on figuring these games out and kind of critiquing them as we go. It's almost like you're watching me do the process, which I struggled with when I first started. I got to be honest, like it freaked me out. I'd done 20 years or so of being isolated in my little gaming bunker here and then coming back with my thoughts. It was very weird for me to be live digesting this material with everybody. And hats off to the entertaining, cool streamers that are out there that can do it so well. But I've gotten better with that. And so I have this vehicle that I can kind of play a bunch of things, because I do talk about a variety of different ideas. I also still review movies. But I can talk about a bunch of games kind of in real time, and then I can use some of that footage and then put reviews and stuff together, and I can still do some rundowns. But if I had to just do one video every day, it would probably be the news. It would be the rundown. But then I'd feel a bit ripped off that I don't get to play the games. It's like, that's what I started this all for, was to be able to play the games, to meet the people and to play the games. So it's tough. Yeah. Long story short, it's very hard, especially when you're on your own.
My dad used to give me a hard time about how my job was just to play games all day. And I was always like, well, no, it's not, but it's a perk for sure. Yeah. It's the reason the passion existed to begin with. Because you're right. If you're just regurgitating news all day long and not actually cracking a game or picking up a controller, what's the point?
Yes. Yeah. And when I put the news out, like I really, because I came from television and that discipline, so I try my best. I'm not as good as the editors that worked with us, but I try my best to cut something, pretty cool together, and that takes a lot of time. And what happens when you're editing, when you're editing, is that you don't necessarily get faster, you just get better. You find out new tricks and stuff, it's not like you just slam it out. It's like, oh, I can do this, I can do that now, I can do this, right. Which has been really cool. I got to be honest, like having to lean into that and learn all of these skills over the last few years has been fun. It's been enjoyable, challenging, but enjoyable.
Well, I think you're doing a great job, I have to say.
Thank you.
What I watched, I think looks really good. So
thank you, sir.
It's working for sure.
I have a question about the late 90s, which is a period is very near and dear to my heart.
Yep.
What do you miss about about the industry from that time period when you started? Like, is there anything that has changed that you're missing?
Well, I think I miss a lot about I think we hit the sweet spot with technology and artistry and experimentation and variety at a double to AAA level through the PS3, Xbox 360, GameCube or Wii kind of. And Nintendo's always their own thing. They're always cool. Yeah. They're always their own thing. But PS3, 360, I think was a really remarkable period. There were just a lot of games, a lot of weird games, a lot of interesting choices. It wasn't about like having a game that lasts forever and how do we monetize on this, which I totally understand from a business standpoint, especially if you've got 200 or more mouths to feed in your studio. You need to figure out, and it takes years to get a game finished. You have to figure out ways to keep income coming in so you can keep people on payroll. And I get it. Although that's been exploited and there's some cynical stuff around all of that stuff. So I miss the amount of wacky choices, and creative choices, because now it's a much bigger endeavor to greenlight a game that's going to reach for AAA, even if it gets there or not. And it's a lot more risk averse because we're talking about all kinds of things. And generally there's also all of this attachment to some kind of store or some downloadable content. It drives me nuts, actually, when I see the post-launch content details announced before a game comes out. Like that just seems so ludicrous to me. Why don't we see if people like the game first? It's like announcing a trilogy. And I was at that Advent Rising press conference, by the way, where Donald Mustard, promised a lot of things around that game. But generally, I don't like the post-game launch content or post-launch game content being discussed prior. I don't like to see the numbers and the machinations for game companies to figure out how they're going to keep making revenue. I don't like that. There's something that rubs me the wrong way around that, and that's probably because I'm a child of the 80s and the 90s, and watching these people just feel great about sending something out into the world. So I miss that, but I also feel like this year is kind of a move back to that, with some very familiar franchises like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and Armored Core. And so and also some huge single player successes like Jedi Survivor and Zelda, the Fire Emblem Engage. Like, what a year. It's just been incredible. So I feel like there's been validation of what has worked for games for many years, reinforced throughout this year. But the other thing that I think is coming for games, which I think is going to be a bumpy period, but eventually will be very good, is this streaming reality, or this subscription reality that Game Pass is throwing the gauntlet down. And once the Activision deal closes and all of these companies that they've purchased actually start delivering the games that they've been in development with, there is going to be this Netflix-like kind of quality to Game Pass being this irrefutable choice. And companies are going to struggle to find their way in this new format and to get the attention that they need in this new format. But I think we're also going to see a lot more software made in the gaming space that's less about keeping people locked in forever and more about keeping people really entertained, so that they tell their friends that you need to get Game Pass and play that game. It's just like we can, especially it's weird right now with the strikes and everything, and we can talk down about how there's a lot of shady stuff that's happened between these streaming services for movie and TV content. But there's also been this influx of incredible programming, and diversity in the programming, and some really risky stuff and some really incredible stuff. We all have our favorite shows on all of these things. Yes, it's come through some kind of consolidation as well, because a lot of these shows would have been scattered across multitudes of traditional broadcast networks, and they've all been consolidated. But there's something extraordinary about this fight for attention and eyeballs, and it's all about content. It's all about the quality of that content. Have you seen Silo yet? You got to watch Silo. Where do you get Silo? It's on Apple TV Plus. Apple makes TV now. What?
Yeah.
Apple makes TV. Okay, I'll subscribe to Apple TV Plus to watch this show called Silo or Ted Lasso or whatever, And I think that's going to happen with games. I think we're going to get this idea of like, have you played this game yet? Well, you got to pay the $10 a month or $20 a month for Game Pass or whatever. I mean, PlayStation's on the way with PS Plus. It's all too confusing. I think Nintendo will probably do something similar if Game Pass really starts to rock. I'm waiting for Steam to announce something, and I'm waiting for Netflix to announce something. And I think there's going to be some studio integration with all of this. I don't know, CJ, you probably know more about this shit than I do, but I feel like once that starts to happen for games, it's another. We're reaching another level, and yes, it's going to be less about collection, and yes, a little bit less about physical ownership, and that's going to piss a lot of people off. But I think the content's going to get really exciting, and we're going to move away from. I say that, but then you look at the amount of money that Genshin Impact makes, and they have like a whole universe now, right? The Hoyo-verse. It's like, Jesus Christ, who would have known that? But I don't know. I feel like if people get better experiences at a reasonable price, because that's been a huge barrier to entry. Let's be honest. Like, we're all hardcores. We've overspent on tons and tons of game content over the years, but that's a lot of money. Whether you're in America, you can rationalize it all you want about time in the game to hours and all that, and what it costs to go see a movie in a theater. Sure. But whatever, baseline, $50, $60 in Canada with taxes, it's $100 for a game. That's a lot of money, and for anybody, but mostly for people that aren't playing, which is the audience that games need, and that all goes back to games need to be doing a better job at telling the story around games. You know, they need to be getting in there and talking about the inventiveness and the creativeness of games.
Yeah. I love the idea that some of these subscription services, like, and this has already happened to me a few times, where I play a game that's outside of the genres that I normally like or play, and then I find like a hidden gem or like something that I thought I hated this genre, but actually, when it's done by this creative team, I actually kind of like it. And like
it's the best.
It's such a good feeling, right? Like, because you find a diamond in the rough. It's like, oh my gosh, like this game that isn't maybe getting like a lot of headlines is pretty damn good. Might be a 2 or 3 year old game.
Totally.
Yeah, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's very similar to the discoverability that we had, I think, when we were much younger, and you could go rent these games.
Exactly. Yes. Right? Yeah. No, I think it's incredibly important. And you know, to Nintendo's credit, like, sure, we would all like the full libraries, and we would also like access to the games we've already bought, Nintendo. But the digitally, I'm talking. But still, NSO is pretty freaking incredible. You know, to cycle through those menus and to see all of these different games in there. The Sega emulation was just phenomenal for the Genesis as well. You know, we want more consoles, but that idea is great, man, and it's such a cool thing. Like, I have a lot of friends that are parents that look to me for advice around this stuff and what should I buy, and whenever anybody buys one of these machines, it's like, get the subscription thing. You know, you may not even need to buy any games right now. Just buy a Game Pass or subscribe to Game Pass, subscribe to the PlayStation Plus, the middle one. I don't think you need to go into the top tier yet, because the back catalog isn't quite there yet, Sony. Get more of those classics on there.
That's true.
And the Nintendo one is not expensive. So, and it's even less expensive if you have another friend that buys a Switch, and then you'll remember those games from the Super Nintendo. And I see people like dads jaws drop and their eyes wide, you know, it's amazing. Right. So yeah, I know it's not as good as owning the retro hardware and owning these things physically. And I have that collection. I love that I do have that collection, but the immediacy and the access to all of this material and what it means to, you know, like surf through it is so good for the business. It's so good, you know, and for most people as well. Like, people are all against streaming and all that shit, but like, imagine if Samsung actually starts to chart some numbers off of Game Pass being a thing that they just have, and people are on. I don't know how successful it is or not, but how is that bad for games? Right. That's good for games. You know, let more people see this stuff. That's the biggest challenge, right? Like, it's amazing. It's still really hard, even for us, even for people that love this. It's really hard for us to know what's out there. Imagine if you're on the outside. I mean, that was the selling pitch for the show too. It's like, you know, parents would walk into an EB Games or whatever, and a GameStop, and they wouldn't know any of the brands, so they'd buy Star Wars. They'd buy Star Wars or Halo or Madden, you know, whatever. Like, there's just the safe things over and over again, and it's because most people are too busy to spend the time it takes to learn what's happening, and the business does a really poor job at letting people in like that, you know. Yeah.
Well, we got some questions via tweet, so I want to at least do a couple of these.
Oh, sure.
Especially the ones that are targeted towards you, Vic.
Okay.
Let's do this one from hacker alias Okatok's lawyer, who says, what is Vic's best outtake story from the pre-YouTube Electric Playground days?
Oh, my God. It was nothing but outtakes. I mean, God, that's such a difficult. I mean, we used to cut those together every year for our Christmas party, and it was just insanity. Because we would it was mostly Tommy would dress up in wacky costumes, and God, one that comes to mind is we had him in rollerblades, and he was supposed to intro some rollerblading game, but he just could never hit the mark. So he'd be in focus in front of the camera, and so he'd be bashing into the camera or flying across the camera, going off, yeah, he was always throwing his body around. And in fact, the very first stuff that we shot with him, was at a celebrity hockey thing in Vancouver, and Cuba Gooding Jr. was one of the people that was there. He was working on some hockey movies, so he was getting some. And oh god, this was great. It ended up in demo stuff, so it wasn't quite a. There was just so much ribbing and goofing around, but all the way through, especially between the review teams, whoever the review teams were. But in this particular instance, Tommy and Cuba Gooding pretended to get into a hockey fight, and then Cuba checks him, and then we had this overhead camera shot where Tommy did the Jim Belushi. I think it was Chris Farley, where he just slid on the ice. I don't know if you ever saw that SNL, where he slid on the ice of Rockefeller Center on his gut, and he just went sliding in and so we did that with Tommy, and it's like, first time that I'd really work with him, and he's like, sure, I'll do that. He was like a stunt man. It was great, but there were tons of moments like that where obnoxious things were said or done. Often the EP Elf, who was played by Rob Koval, who was a producer on the show. He was a part of a lot of outtakes and stuff. He'd dress in a Zelda costume meant for a child, and so his belly would stick out, and there was some funny gags with all of that stuff.
That's awesome.
But that persisted. There was goofiness start to finish on that show.
Excellent. And let's do this one from another Canadian, Guillaume from Nintendo World Report. Has this one. What games from consoles no one but EGM editors have ever touched, 3DO, Jaguar, 32X, WonderSwan, etc., do you wish would get modern ports? Games that were forgotten and would still be fun to you or interesting for people who have never seen them?
Oh, that's a good question.
3DO Road Rash. I mean, come on.
Road Rash needs to come back. I love Need for Speed on the 3DO.
Yeah. Those were two of the three reasons I actually bought a 3DO was Road Rash, Need for Speed, and Wing Commander 3 was the other one. So
3DO was the first machine we got code for. We got a
really
Crystal Dynamics was a publisher then, and they published SNK's Samurai Showdown.
Yep.
And they sent us that on 3DO, and I had it on the other machines, and it was just way better on the 3DO. It was like a night and day. Like, wow, look at what the 3DO can do.
Yeah. I think people don't realize that the 3DO had two of the best versions of Samurai Showdown and Street Fighter that were available at the time. They were just like you said,
it was an amazing machine. Yeah. I loved Alien versus Predator on the Atari Jaguar, and I would love to see that exact game get redone. I know there's been Alien versus Predator games, I think 2 other ones, but it was different. That was super cool. Yeah, that was a great game. Yeah, and they've done Tempest 2000. Yeah, the Rebellion. Yeah, they did Tempest 2000. It's on the Atari collection that Digital Eclipse made, the Atari 50, which is excellent.
Fantastic.
And God, it's still such a playable game on that. And Tempest 4000 is still really solid as well. But I don't know, there was something about Tempest 2000 that Minter did that I think would be great to like remaster it and slick it up and make it like amazing in 4K. I'd love that.
Yeah, the sequels were all great, but they didn't quite there's something about that. There's some magic that he hasn't been able to capture since, or that they haven't been able to capture since about Tempest 2000 for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got one, Greg?
I mean, Road Rash was the first one that my mind went to be honest. I was a big 3DO fan, but yeah, the Road Rash and Need for Speed, I'm a big racing fan anyway, so those are the first places my mind went to. The Road Rash series needs to come back. God,
totally, absolutely. I don't know if EA has the lawyers to do that. Quite frankly. I was a huge Lynx fan. I don't know if you guys were into the Atari Lynx, but I loved that machine. And I loved a game called Todd's Adventures in Slime World, which was kind of like a teenager does Metroid type ripoff type game, but you could link up a bunch of Lynxes and play together. And my beautiful and patient and secretly nerdy wife would play that with me. She was my girlfriend at the time. She's kind of, she got addicted to Rygar on the Lynx, which was awesome to see. That was like her game, was Rygar, and Ms. Pac-Man was awesome on the Lynx. We played Smash TV together. We beat Smash TV on the Super Nintendo together. That's an exceptional game. That's a game that needs to come back. Holy shit. In
Smash
this
TV
climate,
was amazing.
Smash TV.
Yeah. In this climate, though, like with all of the politicians and stuff, like the insanity that's in this world, the divisiveness and the AI and the robotics and all the stuff that's out there. Imagine a new Smash TV today. That would be awesome.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And hey, the Atari thing. Atari is bringing back a lot of stuff and doing like new versions. I think Haunted House is like one of the first ones that they've announced that they're doing like a revamp of. So you never know.
That's so cool.
Todd's Adventures in Slime World might be on their list.
Yeah, that was the only thing I didn't like so much about the Atari 50 is they didn't have enough of the Lynx stuff, because it's a dream to have like the whole Lynx library on the Switch.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, I just love the Lynx. I've got a bunch of those. The cartridges that I have, I've got on my Steam Deck, and it's pretty rad to play them on the big screen like that.
Nice. Anytime someone brings up the Lynx, I just have to mention this. Anytime someone brings up the Lynx, I'm reminded of that commercial. The commercial for the original Lynx, which of course was the
was
thing
massive.
was gigantic.
Yeah.
But of course they're selling the portability of it. And I just remember, I think it was a kid who snuck to the bathroom at school to play his Lynx, and he sits down in the bathroom stall and he's wearing a jean jacket because it's the early 90s. And he reaches into the inside pocket and he pulls out the Lynx, and it's just like he's pulling it out for like a full 3 minutes because the Lynx is so big. And it's so funny to watch it now. Back then it was amazing because, oh my God, it's a video game. The Game Boy was what we had otherwise. It's like, but it's a full color portable video game system. Oh my God. But watching it now, it's just like, man, this thing just doesn't end. It just keeps. Anyway.
Even the redesigned small one was not
it's still
small.
gigantic. Although I loved the way that one looked.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I have two of those. One of them has a broken plastic shell, and I have the original Lynx as well. And this this Vectrex back there, I didn't buy it at full price because it was too much money when it originally came out, but they went out of business, and I paid $80 Canadian for that, and it still works. I haven't turned it on in a while though because it has the buzzing sound, and I'm not a solderer at this present moment, so I haven't opened it up to fix it all.
Yeah, I like your collection of little arcade machines back there. I've got the same one going downstairs.
Yeah, I love these.
I love that.
Replicade sends them out to me. I mean, they know what a hardcore geek I am for the classic days and stuff. So every time that I get one, it's like, oh my God, it's such a cool thing. And they really do. I wouldn't have the room to get the arcade 1-ups or like full size arcade things. So I love that I have the space to be able to present these things, and I dive into them every once in a while. And honestly, like all of this stuff, I know it looks so YouTubey, but it's all the inspiration, And I find like I go and I just stare at yesterday I took a picture of King Shark right there, which I loved from James Gunn's movie, and I posted it. But every day I'm like, look at how cool this stuff is. These are the things that I dreamt that would be made when I was a kid, and all of that was the fire for building Electric Playground. So this is kind of like all of that the stuff that just drove me crazy as a kid, physicalized behind me. This is kind of like the physical Electric Playground back there.
Fantastic.
Nice.
Well, listen, Victor, thank you so much for this. We could keep going for hours, but we don't want to take up too much more of your time.
I love this. Have me on anytime.
That's great, man. I really appreciate it. It's been great to reminisce and hear about Electric Playground and sort of its origins and where you are now. And I mean, I'm sure I speak for everybody that yes, we all want the same thing you do. We want your team back. We want you back on whatever the air is at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, really glad that you're still doing what you're doing, still tuning in all the time, and we wish you nothing but more success.
You're the best. This was really, really cool and totally long overdue. And I'd love to come back anytime you guys would like to have me back, and expect invites to come onto Vic's Basement at some point too.
Oh, that's
maybe
awesome.
After this review season, which is going to kill me.
Crazy review season.
You guys are the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Continued success to both of you guys too.
Appreciate that.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you so much, Victor.
Take care, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
All right.
That was pretty great.
That was great.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Hope everyone enjoyed that. And I know I enjoyed that because, again, like I said at the top of the show, Victor's just somebody that I'm not ashamed to say I've looked up to for a long time. And especially where he's Canadian as well, and that he made that show happen, basically from out of thin air. So super happy that he was willing to come on. And I think now we should probably do an outro.
Let's do it. Alrighty, and that is our show for this week. Thank you very much for listening. If you have a question for us or would like to comment on something you heard, you can direct that to @P1 Podcast on all your social media platforms. We're pretty much on all of those. And hey, if you don't want to do that, we have a website, player1podcast.com. There you'll find our contact information. You will find blog entries about Sega CD stuff from Mr. Greg Seward.
Maybe.
And Generation 16 episodes as they happen. And you'll find show notes and links to all the things that we talked about on the show, and a link to our Discord server where you can discuss this episode with us and our other listeners.
If you would like to subscribe to the Player One Podcast, you can do so by going to player1podcast.com, or really any podcast app that you like to use. We're on all of them. You can find us everywhere. If you'd like to watch the show live, you can do so on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch every Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. And hey, if you're here right now, thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw or heard, and you know what, I'm not going to say and how could you, because I hope you really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that one a lot. Please consider supporting the show over on Patreon, patreon.com/P1Podcast. You can support the show and, of course, help us keep the lights on. Help us keep CJ's lights on. Maybe CJ, if you support the show, can afford to buy some hooks for all that art.
One of these days.
One of these days, behind him.
One of these days.
I can't believe you let Victor Lucas see how disorganized your game room.
I know. Well, this is the reality. I'm keeping it real right here.
CJ's the reality of our reality TV. And if you are a supporter of the $5 variety,
cheap,
you get access to the after show where we play games, we crack wise, we do all the things we can't do on the regular show. CJ, do we have a game for tonight?
No, we don't.
Oh, no.
Actually, we do have a game for tonight. Of course. Yes, we do. We have one from listener Adrian, who has sent us a Jeopardy game. This one based on European region retitling of games that we may know in North America. So we're going to be given the North American title. We have to come up with the European title. So I'm sure this will be interesting, let's just say.
All right. So like I said, if you're a $5 supporter, you will get access to the show this week. It's always a good time. You should consider it.
It is a good time. Yeah.
In the meantime, thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Greg.
And a big thank you again to Victor Lucas for hanging out and chatting with us. It was great, again, to reminisce with you, to hear all about some of the history of EP. And please consider going and checking out Victor's stuff. He's still creating a lot of content over at, I think, youtube.com/EPN is probably the easiest place to find him right now. But he also has a podcast, Victor's Basement, and he's also on Twitch. So, yeah, please support him. Please go check him out. Great guy, super positive. One of the nicest people you're ever going to meet. He definitely deserves all your support.
And we will have links to all of his stuff in the show notes as well. So just check out the show notes. And you can get all the links to his stuff.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, in the meantime, stay safe. Be kind to one another. And we'll talk to y'all again next week. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.